Appreciate you guys showing up as you always do. And I know it's been a minute. I apologize. I haven't left y'all hanging. I know it feels like I left y'all hanging. We had some situations happening, so I want to make sure that I was able to get back to you and let you know that we're definitely still putting out the content, not as regular as I had hoped, just based upon some health opportunities. Anyway, so we're back and giving some information out again. Top 10 legislative advocacy tips. You may have seen the podcast. If you haven't seen the podcast, definitely go over to buildingpower2win.org. The podcast available on Spotify. And we're going to get back to our normally scheduled material, right? We're still going to invite people on. Matter of fact, we're going to have my sister who just got elected down in Alabama. And then there's more folks that we're going to have on. I don't want to confirm them before I say their names. But anyway, back to what I was talking about. Again, sessions are beginning all across the country, right? Legislation is moving at the federal level. Legislation is moving across different states. So we have to be getting our advocacy game up. And what that means is I'm giving out some legislative advocacy tips that I think have helped me build power. Now, one of the things that I was able to do effectively was get to know the lawmakers, right? And, I think that's so important that you build relationships, not with just the lawmakers, but you got to build relationships with their staff, right? You got to know how they have voted in the past. You have to know what their schedule looks like. But also, you'll find out that there are certain lawmakers that are experts in certain areas, and that expertise will allow you to create a bridge to your goal or what your objective is. There's also priorities, right? Like, not every bill is a priority to every lawmaker, and you have to appreciate that, but you can also figure out a way to make your bill a priority for that lawmaker by, again, building those bridges. Now, what I was able to do, and one of the things that I still believe is the most effective thing, is to build relationships with the staff members. The legislative director, the general counsel, those are important people, but also the person that answers the phone. That clerk who really doesn't get a lot of attention and everybody's asking to do something, but nobody's asking their opinion. That's the person that I went and sat down with, because that's the person that's going to give you the inside scoop that you're not going to be able to get as you go online and try to track this bill. Or a bill. Be consistent with your messaging, right? So if you're going in there as a group, everybody needs to be hitting the same note. You can't be talking about prison closures if the issue is fair chance hiring. You can't be talking about immigration if the issue is voting rights. Though those issues are imperatives, you have to have a consistent message. So every time that you go in there, you're going to have a drumbeat of the same message. The person that comes behind you is going to be talking about the same thing, maybe with a nuance, right? And so that's going to make the difference, is that as you may have the same messaging, your stories are going to have that nuance, which leads us into the next part, right? Which is have a strong story to tell. There's nothing more powerful when you're talking to a lawmaker, a legislator, than to tell your story, but in a compelling way, because there's not a lot of time, right? And I'll be honest with you, I really didn't meet with a lot of lawmakers to get things done. I met with their staff. and their staff is going to spend more time with them than you are. So if you are able to get their staff on board, get their staff excited by telling your story, that's what I found to be more effective. But try to tell your story from their perspective. You know, with this criminal justice world, and as we're trying to create this environment where there's a softer landscape for criminal justice in a bipartisan way, most folks on those staffs have someone or know someone who is directly impacted by the criminal justice system. Those are the folks that, you know, lean into them, right? Have them tell you their story. And then when they tell you their story, you bridge your story with their story. And that means once you know their story, you're able to persuade them. And that's the next step, is know how to persuade. No tactic or approach in itself is effective, right? But when you compound your story with a persuasive a tone and a persuasive way of drawing that person in to your goal or objective, you know, that's going to help you be adaptable, right? Because things are going to change. As folks know, there are different lengths of sessions across the country. Some are for 90 days, some are for 30 days, some go a year. So even when you think about a 30-day session and it's a bicameral bill that you have to get passed to get to the governor's office, you're going to have to move quick, right? And that means that you're going to have to be able to be adaptable in your storytelling, adaptable in your strategy, and adaptable in your tactics. And so that means the next step is to be a good listener, right? When that lawmaker is talking, you should be listening. As a matter of fact, your pitch should be no more than 60 seconds. And, you know, you'll learn how to tell your story in 60 seconds. It's going to be important to get your story, you know, done in 60 seconds, because you want to be listening. As you're listening to what that legislator says, as you're listening to what that staff member says, that's going to help you help them devise a message to help push this bill or a bill, right? Don't try to sell it. You don't have to sell it. You know, they're going to devise their own message. They're going to be able to talk the bill in a language that they're going to be able to get their constituents on board. So it's going to be important to work with power players, because those power players are going to be able to move things in spaces that you're not going to be able to get into. If this bill gets into a committee, you're not going to be on the hearing. You're not going to be able to be in that space. So this lawmaker is going to have to be able to take that energy and that language that you've given him and coalesce it into something that he can pitch, right? So you're going to have to communicate consistently and clearly. Speak honestly, speak succinctly, a whole lot more succinctly than I'm doing right now. But, you know, when you ask questions, they should be appropriate questions. They shouldn't be questions that causes, you know, the conversation to come to a standstill, that paralyzes the conversation. Like, don't ask questions that require that lawmaker to make a commitment that they may not be able to in that moment and at that time, right? Speak clearly. Don't use, you know, some of us are smart and have read the dictionary, and we like to use big words and speak plainly, right? Finally, be prepared, right? Have your proposals well in advance. You should already have a draft of the legislation to his LD or her LD. You should already have a draft, the legislative director. You should already have a draft of the legislation that's gone through with their counsel, and your policy person and their policy person should be working close. So when you go in there and talking to this legislator, this staff person, they got to have a sense of what you're talking about. You're not just trying to pitch them an idea based upon what you are thinking about. Give them something physical that they can look at, go over, and already have what we call a pathway to victory in mind, right? How many votes do you need in the House? How many votes do you need in the Senate? How many votes do you need in the committee? How willing is the governor going to be to sign this? Have you got the parliamentarian involved in case there's some issues in the drafting of the bill, right? Just making sure that strategically you've done the thinking as you are talking to this lawmaker or to your constituents. Now, the one thing that I left out, and I apologize, is identify fellow advocates and partners in your specific niche community to better understand the process, monitor legislation, and assess strengths and weaknesses. You have to be honest about the ability of the bill to pass in its current state. And that's going to take a collective effort, a collaborative effort. So you want to make sure that the stakeholders who are going to be affected, the stakeholders who are experts in this area, again, fellow advocates and partners. It doesn't necessarily have to be a coalition, but y'all need to be on the same page. So the pressure that is applied is even, and it's applied across the board. And, the more voices involved, the better off we are, right? So with that, thank you so much. I apologize for being out of the loop. I'm still here. And we'll talk more about it. If you haven't done so already, follow me on Instagram, follow me on LinkedIn. And if you want to be on the show, make sure you send me an email, info@lewisconwayjr.com. All right. Y'all have a great one. I really, really appreciate you. Have an amazing evening. Y'all stay out of trouble. You keep doing what you're doing. All right. Keep fighting the good fight.